Emily is from IMPAX Asset Management, which I'll let her tell you about. She's going to do a much better job than me. But Emily is a VP with the company and works throughout the West Coast, helping financial advisors, institutions who want to invest in their products that are all based on sustainable principles. So Emily is originally from New Hampshire, and she lives out here now. So we're lucky to have her. But I think that you'll enjoy learning from her, as I have. With that, Emily, I turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. It's so good to see you and have everybody join us. I really appreciate, I know we're calling from all over, so to take the time out for this conversation. And I do hope it is a conversation with lots of questions and dialogue, and love to kind of hear your thoughts as we go. So really appreciate the time. I've really enjoyed getting to know Jeff and working with him and learning a little bit more about the firm. So really appreciate the time. Some of the things that I wanted to go over that Jeff was just kind of framing is, sustainable investing, what it is, why it's important, why it's something to really be thinking about as a framework for investing going forward. And I want to do that by telling you a bit more about the firm that I work for, IMPAX Asset Management, talk about the history of our firm, because I think that's really interesting and something that Richard was just commenting on before we started. I want to also talk about what our overall philosophy is. I think we get a little confused sometimes in this space with the terminology and kind of what one company is doing over another. So I really want you to understand who IMPAX is, how we look at the markets. And I think that's been an important aspect that Jeff has really been drawn to about our firm. It's kind of how we think about the world. With that, I also want to talk about some of these themes and drivers that are pushing us to this new economy, this next economy, some of the ones that Jeff mentioned, right? The IRA Act and others. And these can really be seen as opportunities. There's also challenges out there, and there's a way to kind of take advantage and invest in that way so that you're investing for that next economy and really position mostly in opportunities and away from risks. I also want to make sure that we talk a little bit about the strategy that Jeff just mentioned, the IMPAX Global Environmental Markets. I think talking about that is a good way to understand how we invest in solutions, talk about some company examples, and then also talk about shareholder engagement, because I think that is a really key part of how we do things at IMPAX. And I think it's important for you all to kind of understand that and hear some stories about that. But again, as we go, I know there's a chat box. I don't know that I can see it or if Amber's running that, but feel free and just ask questions as we go. I'm happy to kind of pause and take those, and then we'll make sure we leave lots of questions at the end, because I know this is an engaged group. So excited to hear what you think and to hear your feedback. So who is IMPAX? I've been with the firm for just about 4 years and been in the sustainable investing industry for longer than that. And I really was drawn to IMPAX because they do have such a strong history and such a clear focus of how they're investing and how they're looking at the world. So when we describe who IMPAX is, we often say that we're a specialist asset manager, and we're really focused on the opportunities that arise from the transition to a more sustainable global economy. And we'll talk more about what that means. Do know that we have a sole focus on this transition and on sustainable investing as a whole. It's important to know that it's all we do that informs every investment decision we make. Every dollar that we're investing is under this sustainable investing umbrella. So when we talk about this transition, we really feel that when we're looking at the markets, we're looking at the world, we're seeing that capital markets are being and will be continually shaped by global sustainability challenges, right? Think climate change, pollution, essential investments needed in infrastructure, resource efficiency, human capital. And so it's really our job and our experience in this space that allows us to be able to invest in this way. So we've been around for about 25 years. I was excited to hear Richard say he's been investing with us for almost that long. Even before that, when we were known as Pax World Funds, we actually started in the 70s. So an extremely long history of dedication and of leadership in sustainable investing. We manage about 50 billion in assets, and we've got over 250 experienced team members that work across the globe. So as Jeff said, I'm out here in the Bay Area. I've got colleagues on the West Coast. We've got colleagues in New Hampshire, in London, and New York, and elsewhere. And I think that's important because it really helps us when we're investing globally, right? To have that on the ground expertise making these investment decisions. So everything that we do, we've already used the term sustainable investing a few times. The most sort of basic definition of that is really, when making investment decisions for long-term competitive returns, you're integrating financial decisions, financial criteria alongside ESG criteria, right? Which stands for environmental, social, and governance. Probably a term you've all seen or heard. For us, the way to understand it is it's a body of data, of information that our research team can take and gather and analyze. And we do that because it really is necessary, we feel, in order to make really, long-term investment decisions, to identify risks, to identify opportunities, and to really manage our process accordingly. So everything we do is going to integrate that into our investment decisions. And really every investment that we make, every dollar that we're investing, we're really investing it towards this more sustainable economy. So yes, we're thinking about long-term returns, of course, but we're also thinking about those impacts on society and on the environment. And our engagement efforts, which we'll talk more about, also inform kind of our research process, but they also help us really use our voice and our leadership in this space to really push companies to do better and to be better. I thought I'd take a little bit of a moment to talk about that ESG term. I don't want to kind of derail us, but because it's such a term that you see out there in the news and misused quite a bit, I just wanted to walk through it with a little bit more detail, and we can certainly address any questions that you all might have. But really, it's this three-letter term that was developed many years ago, and it's good in that it encapsulates this sort of material, non-financial data that we're looking at for companies. Just again, know that it's part of an overall process. It's not the be all end all of how we do what we do, but it is an important set of data that our team uses. And it really is tied to this idea, again, of that transition to a more sustainable economy, of how we're judging, do we go with company A over company B? We can't make that decision without understanding their sustainability makeup. We can't understand, how they're really going to be poised for risk or opportunity without understanding that. So, again, it's really all about materiality. For E, which we'll probably talk most about today, that's environment. S is social. G is governance. And again, we could spend the whole rest of the time breaking down each three of those letters. But, E, really think about, the company's impact on the environment, which no company, no person can escape having an environmental impact. So we can think about, a company's water usage, electricity usage, energy usage, think about their impact on the natural environment. Think about, are they sort of a good environmental citizen, or are they having negative impacts on the environment? How transparent are they around these issues as well? Social aspects, I think, came up a lot more during COVID and made really people stop think about, how companies treat their employees. You can also think about, diversity within an organization, as well as, for large companies, right? Their human rights issues, global supply chains, and governance, really thinking about how the company is managed, right? Do we sort of trust the management team that's in place? Do they have a diverse board, right? Where they have a variety of gender and races represented that are making strong investment decisions? Do they have a separate chair and board? What are they paying that highest level employee to the lowest level employee? So again, you can see it incorporates a lot of data, but at the end of the day, it is part of our process, because we want to make those smart long-term decisions. We want to identify risks and opportunities, and so we use sort of that ESG term in there as part of that process. Does that kind of make sense and sort of jive with what folks think about that term? Okay. Just wanted to make sure we kind of got that out of the way, because it's very important, but I think there's sometimes confusion with that as well. So, when I talk about IMPAX, again, we talk about this transition to a more sustainable economy. So why is that sort of important to understand, or as an investor or potential investor? What does that kind of really mean? our view and our team that's been working, for years in this space really kind of identifies and sees, and as Jeff was kind of alluding to, that, for so long, money's been invested without really thinking about the bigger consequences, right? Without thinking about the actual negative impacts that you're having on society and on the environment, right? Working just towards those short-term gains actually can have a detrimental impact and undermine value and social stability over the long term. So we really feel like we need to make this shift from that depletive economic model, right, where it was just growth at any cost, to one that's really focused on a more sustainable goal, one that really factors in those environmental and social outcomes, thinks long term, right? So we refer to that kind of moving from that depletive to sustainable as this transition to a more sustainable economy. And that viewpoint is helpful for us because it really informs so many of our investment decisions and investment tools that we're using. Because we see that in this transition, there's going to be companies, there's going to be sectors that are really well positioned for growth in this transition, while there's going to be other areas of the market that we really see as being poised for risk because they're kind of unwilling or unable to adapt. So when you think about your portfolio, and as Jeff's probably talked to you about, right, it's not just about sort of finding those winners, those opportunities, but also it's thinking about, all right, am I avoiding these areas of risk that are going to kind of bring down my portfolio value? So it's, again, really about identifying the risks and opportunities, and for IMPAX using a set of proprietary tools and kind of viewpoint on the world, so that we're really positioning our portfolios for that transition for the long term. And as Jeff was kind of alluding to with the IRA Act and others, we really do feel like we are at this transition point, right? This inflection point where we're moving faster and faster towards this more sustainable economy. That's being driven by, things like legislation like the IRA Act that Jeff mentioned, but also consumer preferences, right? Clients demanding that focus around sustainability, regulation, not just here in the US, but globally, around companies, and really getting them to commit to being more transparent around these issues. Technology, right? I mean, we see, if you just look at sort of the renewable space, right, it's just a matter of numbers at this point, right, where it's just become cheaper in terms of wind and solar, right? So there's just changes that are continually to move us towards this more sustainable economy. So the reason why that's important to kind of think about and understand as an investor, right, is, things are always changing. Your portfolio of 5 years ago, 10 years ago is not the portfolio of tomorrow or the next 5 years, right? So you really want to kind of think in that long-term risk opportunity framework. And so we really feel like we're in a good position at IMPAX to understand the challenges that we're facing, to really understand how to identify areas that we consider, high opportunity and low risk, and how to position our portfolios accordingly. So we've got some great, papers and a video that Jeff mentioned that we can share after, that you can watch that talks more about this, but really kind of important to understand that that's the viewpoint that we're coming from at IMPAX. There's certainly a lot of challenges as well, right? I think we can look at a lot of these things as opportunities, but we're not investing in a bubble, right? We have to kind of think about what's going on in the world that we're investing in. And these aren't just environmental issues, social issues, right? They are financial issues, and they're having an impact on the economy today, and will continue to do so. So some of the ones that we talk about, or that you might be thinking about, right? Population growth. I saw the stat the other day that estimated to increase by 2 billion people in the next 30 years. So think of all the implications that has. We think about natural resources and this growing population. Natural resources right now are being used at a rate about twice that of which the Earth can regrow them, renew them. Right. So think of the implications that continues to have. When you think about just the climate as a whole, geez, this past week, right, or a week or two, the hottest day on record, right, ever recorded, the impacts that has. When we think about kind of global GDP, right, which is a way we kind of think about our markets, in 2022, it cost about 0.5 percentage point of total GDP because of climate-related economic losses, right? Think, we know here, right, in California, of course, fire, but also drought, just extreme weather. And that's estimated, if things kind of continue as they're on the path to do, that could impact GDP by over 15% in the next, 10, 15 years, right? So you kind of see again that climate impacts are not alone. They're really going to be affecting the markets. So you kind of think about these things and think, all right, these seem like, obviously environmental risks, financial risks, how can we invest in a way that's going to sort of move us to these more solution-oriented names as a way, one, to sort of address these huge issues, but also as a way to kind of think, all right, what opportunities might be out there that we can be investing in that have, strong long-term return potential, while also addressing these sort of major climate issues. So one of the strategies that Jeff had mentioned in the beginning that IMPAX has run for a number of years is called our IMPAX Global Environmental Markets Fund. And, I think with sustainable investing, again, you can think about, all right, I'm going to avoid oil and gas. I'm going to avoid this sort of, negative, ESG type of companies. But you can also think, all right, how can we use what we know about these companies and about this transition to really identify areas of opportunity and really find companies that are providing really innovative solutions to these resource challenges, right? Think not just growing populations and climate change issues, but the need for clean water with our populations, waste, energy transitions, and so on. So there's so many interesting opportunities where we can actually identify these companies that are investing in the solutions, and really feel like this is a strategy that's very much poised for where the markets are going and where the money is going to continue to be flowing. And so we have a very kind of in-depth research team that looks at really the revenues of these companies to say, all right, is this, part of the business of the company, or is this really the mandate of the company is to solve for water issues or energy issues? So I thought maybe I'd share a couple company examples and kind of tie it to some of these themes, because I think that helps kind of put it in perspective, if that makes sense. So one big one, which, especially here in San Francisco, we can't escape, right, is this transition to EVs, right, to electric vehicles. I don't know about any of you, but the amount of Waymos in my neighborhood is a little out of control. I haven't yet done a driverless car. I'd be interested to see if any of you are. I'm been a little scared, but no one can deny that we are, really moving very rapidly away from that sort of traditional combustion engine car to EVs. Here in California, right, I believe it's 2035 that sort of combustion engine cars will no longer be able to be created. It can only be those sort of low emission, net zero emission cars that can be made. Another interesting stat one of our analysts shared is that in 2012, there was about 120,000 EV cars produced in that year. And come forward to today, we make about that many in about 5 days. And that's going to only continue to increase, right? So you think, all right, how can I take advantage of that from an investment perspective? Well, some might think, all right, you could choose to invest in a car company, but, at IMPAX, we feel like that's not necessarily our expertise. And how are we going to know is it going to be Ford? Is it going to be, another company that sort of leads the charge? So instead, we've been able to kind of take advantage of this theme by thinking about companies that sort of make the software and parts that can be used by all those car companies. So one company that we invest in currently is called Aptiv. And so I'm no expert on how EVs are made, but they basically make the software and the parts that go into any of these EV type materials. So again, they're in a very strong market position where they're going to be used and utilized by all these car companies that are transitioning very quickly to EVs. So they're very transparent about their reduction in CO2 emissions, very sustainable focused company. So something we feel, is in a great position. They also do a lot of work on car safety too, which is a big issue. So that's just one example of kind of how do you tap into that transition from a sort of automobile or transportation perspective. Another one I think about often here in California, especially I was just in the Central Valley a few weeks ago, where it was like 110 degrees. It was crazy. But you think about, right, agriculture, and you think about how much food we produce and use to feed the country here just in California. As we were talking, the global populations are going to continue to increase. So how are we going to continue to not only feed this growing population, but how can we do it in a way that's more sustainable, right? That uses less pesticides, that maybe uses the sort of finite farmland that we have in a more efficient and sustainable manner. So one of the companies that we invest and take advantage of here is called Trimble. I don't know if anyone has heard of this company. It's actually a GPS software company, but they work very specifically on in the agricultural space, because they actually can sort of tap in and use that GPS technology to let farmers know when to irrigate, how often to water. So much more efficient use of water to maximize yields, to think about using less harmful chemicals. So it's been a really interesting company, and one that again is kind of poised again for that benefit of need going forward. John Deere is another one we also talk about in the agriculture space. I play trucks with my nephew all the time, so I think of it more as the the tractors and trailers, but they actually do quite a lot of work in precision agriculture as well. So similar to Trimble in that they're thinking about, how do we farm more sustainably? So that's another one that kind of again ties into that population growth. Another really big area is just energy efficiency, right? Thinking about not just renewables, but again, how are we going to continue to be in this space where we need to lower emissions? We really need to think about that climate scenarios that we have out there. So one area is buildings, right? Building efficiency, both in residential and commercial buildings. It's actually about 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the US come from buildings. So you think heating and cooling, HVAC systems might not sound like the most exciting area, but it's such a big opportunity to do overhauls of buildings, have that immediate reduction, not only in energy usage, but of cost. So again, kind of that financial aspect. So a company that we invest in the Environmental Markets Fund and some others actually at IMPAX is called Train Technology. And Train actually works just on HVAC type systems, right? So they go in, they overhaul the buildings to have that reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, reduction in energy costs. So that's one that we've really have invested in for quite a while. They actually also have a refrigeration business. So when you think again about food and greenhouse gas emissions, food waste is a huge emitter as well when food's not getting to people in time or not fresh. And so they're developing some innovative ways to help with transportation of food to get there faster, to have less food waste. So again, really, really sustainably focused all around. Any questions on those? I have a few more I can share, but I think it's kind of interesting to put them in perspective, and maybe some companies some of you haven't heard of or maybe have heard of.
So if you have questions, unmute yourself. You can also put them in the chat.
Good point.
Schneider Electric.
Schneider Electric, Jeff is saying.
What's that?
Schneider Electric.
Oh, Schneider Electric. Yeah, that's another good one. That's in our environmental markets portfolio. They're really a global leader at sort of all things energy efficiency. Yeah, so that might be a name some of you are more familiar with as well. Yep. Great example. Awesome. And you let me know if anything appears in the chat, because I don't think I can see it, but okay. Well, let me share a few more, and then we can talk some more about some of these trends. Like Jeff had mentioned, the IRA Act. So we can talk a little bit more about that as well. Another one, gosh, I think about a lot is water, right? So we think again about growing populations and safe and healthy, clean water. And we all know we've seen some sad stories about people that lack clean water here in the U.S. There's a big portion of our infrastructure that water infrastructure that's so old and so small that it's very much out of date and really poised to be causing some issues now and down the road. So we invest in companies like American Water Works, which is one of the biggest water utilities here in the US, again, going through and kind of repairing that old infrastructure, making sure that we're going to continue to have access across the country to clean water, to prevent, there's some crazy stats. I don't think I have the stat in front of me, but about water that's just lost to leaks and old pipes, and just thinking about kind of the fixes that you can make there that can have such a dramatic effect on our access to water, and also that, you know, stop losing so much water just due to old infrastructure.
Emily, there is a question.
Oh, sure.
Should I interrupt you whenever it comes up?
Yeah, go ahead. And I apologize, I can't see the chat, but if, oh, wait, no, I can now. So, oh, yeah, this is a good question. So if in case everyone can't see the chat, the question was about like organic or regenerative agriculture, if that's an area that we're invested in. So we do kind of look at the sustainable agriculture space. And I mentioned, you know, Trimble and John Deere. So in a way that's tied to that, right? Because we're thinking about how to use less and less pesticides. I think from sort of a regenerative agriculture standpoint, it's a little bit more sort of an area where we're supportive and maybe on the periphery, but in terms of public companies that we are been able to invest in that sort of are directly involved with organic or regenerative, probably not as many examples. I can double check if there's some, but definitely I think an interesting and growing area. And I think the engagement work that we do with companies and sort of the sustainable investing sort of family out there that we support, that's definitely an area that I think we'll see more of. We did just publish a paper around biodiversity as well. So I'll make sure we share that with you too, because I think that has some kind of talking points that are related to that. But yeah, great question. I think when talking about, you know, agriculture and talking about water, you know, I think as Jeff was saying with the Inflation Reduction Act, right now we're really poised for some strong tailwinds to these types of companies. I think some of these numbers just seem so large, it's kind of hard to put in context, but you know, as Jeff was saying, the Inflation Reduction Act, it's, you know, somewhere north of $370 billion that's going towards accelerating action on climate change, right? Which is why it's called kind of that climate change bill. It's agreed that it's really kind of the biggest, most significant sort of climate related federal legislation that we've seen yet. We feel like those numbers can even, you know, get bigger, but some of the areas that that money is sort of earmarked to go towards are some of the areas we talked about, right? Clean electricity, transportation, like we talked about with EVs. There's a lot of incentives out there to purchase EVs. About $9 billion or so in rebates around building efficiency. So like I was talking about, like the train technology example. You know, maybe this will tie into kind of that question about regenerative agriculture, but there's also about $20 billion specifically for sort of the agricultural field to really understand how to cut emissions and how to have more client-friendly agricultural practices. So, oh, cute picture just popped up. So I think that'll be interesting, and maybe there'll be something, there's some areas there that go from sort of the private area to the public area that we'll be able to take advantage of. So I think that's a big backdrop, an important backdrop to understand kind of why we're really excited about some of these areas in particular. Same with the CHIPS Act that Jeff mentioned, right? It has a big impact, about $280 billion or so to reshore semiconductor manufacturers. So we've got some companies like Applied Materials and others that are right involved in that semiconductor space. So again, when you kind of think about, all right, where what are the signals that we're seeing in the marketplace and from a legislative perspective, right? It's really poising us for some strong tailwinds going forward. So we're definitely excited about this particular strategy. And I think just about sort of what we're doing as a firm, as a whole, because there's lots of exciting ways to invest, to really be making a difference, making a positive impact, specifically on the environment, as we've talking about. But it's also that kind of, win-win impact, because you're also investing in these companies and putting your money towards companies that are providing solutions, but are also then at the same time poised for some long-term performance. So let me pause there, see if there's questions. I want to talk about engagement a little as well, but anyone have kind of thoughts on any of the themes we've been talking about? And I've got the chat open now too, if you want to type into the chat.
Yeah, Emily, I wanted to make a small footnote to the climate bill.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into all those things, like you were talking about the agriculture part, which is really, that's a huge amount going towards that technology. But the carbon capture technologies to take carbon and store it away. And then there's the fuels, the green hydrogen and other money for fuels to get us something that, find something besides diesel and gasoline that'll run an airplane and a truck. So it's really amazing when you look at the climate bill, just how the scope of it, of what it involves. Anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And our analysts, listen to the company calls, right? So when Schneider has a call or Trane has a call or others, they've kind of been noting how many of them have been mentioning, maybe not so specifically yet how they're going to factor in that money from the IRA, but they've been bringing it up as a big part of sort of their overall business planning and outlook. And so I think we're seeing that, really be impactful today as well. There was a question in the chat, in case anyone else is seeing it, about if we invest just in public companies, and yes, we do, right? So I think a lot of these things, especially these newer technologies, whether it's green hydrogen or otherwise, like that are still being developed, there may not yet be a public company that's focused on this and has the right sort of financial metrics and leadership in the space for us to invest in. But there's certainly kind of a big area of impact investing where you might be invested in private entities or companies or startups. I know we've got a lot of exciting ones here in the Bay Area, but yes, for us at IMPAX, we're investing in publicly traded companies. In the Global Environmental Markets Fund, it's primarily sort of larger companies, but also some mid-sized companies. So ones that are established, that we can really see a track record and really an understanding of their management and what they're focused on. And someone had a comment too about, carbon capture, composting. Yeah, there's no one solution. So I think having all these different ideas is really exciting. I know we tried to share a video at the beginning. We have a short video, Jeff, that I'll send to you to share with the group. We recently hired an individual, Charlie Donovan, who's really, he was a professor of sustainable economies at University of Washington. He also used to work for BP. He worked for the Clinton administration. So he's got a really good perspective on sort of, these newer emerging areas of sort of this next economy and how we're going to kind of continue to have this energy transition. There's a longer version that's pretty detailed, and then there's a shorter kind of video too. So I'll send that to you because I think it's interesting to hear about. He talks about hydrogen and things like that you mentioned, Jeff. Because we do so much work evaluating companies on these various issues. And we have a lot of knowledge and experience at our firm about what we're looking for from companies. We kind of feel like it's our mandate to really do this extra work and to actually go back to companies and say, you might be doing pretty good on this or pretty good on that, but there's always room for improvement. And so we've talked a lot about environmental issues today, but kind of when I was explaining what the social and governance aspects are, we really see diversity, equity, and inclusion and as a huge issue, a human rights issue, a financial issue. So we engage companies primarily on climate-related issues and gender, or more broadly, I should say, sort of human capital type issues. We do that by just having dialogue with companies, by raising issues that we think are important. We might also go the route of filing a shareholder proposal. When we really want to get something officially in front of a company that they need to vote on with their shareholders. So it's an exciting process. Some things can take, some time, but it's exciting to kind of look back at our history and say, hey, look at the kind of wins that we've had, and look at sort of the momentum that's caused. Because I think when you go to one sort of larger company and you get them to, maybe it's just as basic as, having a more robust, transparent and published sustainability report as one kind of initial step, up to getting them to commit to, greenhouse gas reductions over a specific time period. You can kind of see that has a domino effect within industries where, other companies are saying, all right, I want to stay competitive. I want to think about our reputation. And so because, other companies have sort of stepped up and been transparent about this or committed to that, we better do so as well. So it's kind of an exciting way to really push through and really encourage or catalyze companies to kind of be better corporate citizens. We prepare a report every year that kind of shows some of the highlights of the engagement work that we've done. So I'll make sure that Jeff shares that with you. One engagement that's kind of interesting that's ongoing is rather than just focusing on companies we own, which is how we typically do engagement. We partnered back in 2020 with the state of New York to really have a campaign against or for all companies in the S&P 500 and asking them about physical climate risk. I think we've seen so much in the past couple of years, whether it's extreme drought or extreme fires, COVID, right, has an impact on how companies can perform on their supply chains, on their business operations. So we're doing some work where we're getting companies to report very specifically kind of where they're located in the world. And from that, having conversations with companies like Smucker's, which we just had some conversations with this past year around how they're thinking about climate risk, right? Smucker's, so you might not realize, actually a big part of their business is coffee. They own Folgers and a couple other coffee companies. Coffee is a very sort of particular crop. They call it a Goldilocks crop because it can't be too high, too wet, too dry. It has to sort of be just right. And so we've done some dialogue and continue to work with them about, how they're thinking about the risks to that business if, as climate continues to change. We've also done some work with Verizon this past year or two, where we really asked them to think about, how are they using renewable energy in their business, right? And we don't just want companies to come back and say, yes, that's something we should really think about. We'll consider that. We really want companies to make commitments and be transparent around those commitments so that we can track them, so their shareholders can track them. And so they've recently committed to, I think it was about 50% of their electricity usage to come from renewables by 2025, right? So that sets a time-bound goal and a specific goal that, again, we can kind of keep on them and track. So those are just a couple of examples, but I think it's kind of an important kind of full circle thing to describe, to really understand who IMPAX is and know that all this work we're doing is because of our clients and advisors like Jeff who talk to their clients about this, because at the end of the day, it's really how you're choosing to invest your money. Are you investing for this next economy? Are you investing in a way that's helping your assets go towards promoting companies that you'd feel comfortable investing in and are really kind of making strides to do and be better. So let me pause there again. I feel like I've talked for a while. I see another comment in the chat. I recently heard a disturbing interview on NPR. about offsets. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think there's the term, right, greenwashing, which we touched on a little bit, right? We get in there and find out as much as we possibly can about companies before we're making investment decisions. And I think that's a good point too about our engagement work, because when we engage, we're not just telling a company to do something. We're actually seeing how they respond to that conversation. Are they really taking these things seriously? And so it further informs, maybe we thought of them as a real sort of sustainable leader, and maybe we realize that's either the case, or maybe they can actually be doing better. I think carbon offsets, I'm not an expert on that by any means, but I have heard similar sort of articles, when you think about, is offset really valid, right? Or, if you say you're planting a forest to offset this carbon, right? How long is it going to take that forest to grow to actually be producing that carbon? I know I heard a similar interview where it was, things are being planted in the wrong place. And so I think with everything, right, there's certainly issues. So we want to make sure that when we're talking with companies, that we really want to understand what they do. And I think that the great thing for IMPAX too is, we can't be working on sort of every issue, but we've got a lot of expertise on our staff, right? From an engagement to also investing. We've got a climate scientist. The founder of IMPAX was a physicist by trade. So there's a lot of a kind of science and knowledge that goes into this. And I think Sarah, you might enjoy that article and video about that we've got from Charlie Donovan. So I'll make sure that Jeff that you have that as well, so you can share.
That's great.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention, Emily, and about one of the things you were just talking about this engagement and these companies. There's different ways to look at investing in this theme, and one way is investing, what I would call on the sidelines, from the stands, where you've got companies that are doing things that are helpful and can be helpful in the future. But then there's what I would call the ones that are the players on the ground impacting things right now. And as I've been in this market, this is one of the things that's really been come clear to me, is that you as an investor want to understand what you're investing in. So that if you have an objective, if you have a specific objective in with your finances or your heart, okay, that that company, that fund, that portfolio is doing what you think it's doing. And you mentioned greenwashing earlier, and just because a fund or an ETF or whatever says we're ESG or we're environmentally sound or whatever, means nothing. Absolutely nothing. You have to look under the hood and really dig into what it is. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that, because that's been something that has been a real education for us here, doing that. And that's why I mentioned like Schneider Electric. They may be the king of players out there. They do so much. They do it all over the world, like you mentioned. They're one of many, but it's in the fund, and I know that, so that's why I brought it up. Okay.
And on that note, Emily, did you see the question? Is there a global standard or rating for companies' ESG?
I did see that. Yes, thank you. I was trying to listen and type,
Of course.
but
Oh, yeah.
yeah, no, it's a great question, and it often comes up. And I think Jeff was kind of getting to it in that, when I talk about the research that we do at IMPAX, there are a variety of sort of third-party agencies out there that'll give you kind of an ESG score. But at our firm, we never just take, we never pick one and say, all right, we'll go with this rating agency and pick this ESG score. We're always looking at that in the umbrella of our own internal research. So we have our own proprietary ESG score that we're creating, because it can be confusing, right? Depending on sort of, are they just looking backward at issues? Are they using the same sort of key performance areas that we'd be looking at? So I think while ESG data and maybe even ratings has sort of improved over time, and there's a little bit more transparency from places like Sustainalytics and MSCI, those are kind of the two big ones. There's still disagreement. And so for us as active managers, and us as managers that, are so focused on this space, we've got our own internal sustainability team that's going to be making those ultimate decisions. Yeah, great question.
Yeah, that really is a good question. I see that it's from you, Rebecca, because there really is no global standard, and that's why this research piece of this is so important today, so that you know what you're investing in, and that it's following the path you want to follow. And boy, there's so much camouflage out there. I call it corporate camouflage, and you you have to look through it and get down to what's real.
Well, I know we've kept you all for a while. Any other questions or anything else you wanted to add, Jeff? I mean, I'm sure I'll be happy to supply kind of this follow up, and hopefully it will spur more questions from the group. And Jeff's a great resource to go back to as well on this. And I work closely with him if questions ever come up on the holdings or the strategies that we have. So I really appreciate always getting to kind of hear from you all, and appreciate very much the time you took to join us for this. So I don't know, Jeff, if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, just one thing. Obviously Emily and IMPAX are such a great company and resource in this area, but specifically this fund of theirs, the Global Environmental Fund. The reason that we like that and subscribe to it as something to use is it covers all of these areas. It's not just focused on, renewable energy or, water or, agricultural resources. It focuses on all of it. And there's holdings that affect all of these environmental issues. What's cool is they've got a really nice piece on this that outlines that, and it's really interesting, and be happy to get that to anybody. And they have, and as she mentioned, all these great resources that they have put together. She didn't mention it, but IMPAX put out the first socially responsible mutual fund in 1971. That's kind of like over 50 years ago.
And nearly 25 years ago, Jeff, when I found them, literally from that day, their reputation has been completely unblemished. And that's not easy to do. I mean, you have to have integrity, and you have to know what you're doing to do it for 25 years with their reputation. Because I mean, basically, when it comes to the fundamental, the fundamentals of it, I think they're the most respected company that's out there, and has been for decades.
I gotta have you on all my calls, Richard. I love that.
It's true. It's true. I've been there. I've looked the whole time. Nobody ever says anything bad about you, ever.
Emily, that's why we have you in IMPAX, to make us look good.
There you go. I like it.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
that
you, Jeff.
comment.
thank you so much, Emily, for the time and your energy and effort, and really appreciate you giving us the kind of the big picture. And it said anybody that is interested in learning more about this, and I think it's a learning process to go through so that you get to where you're investing. If you want to invest in this theme, you want to understand what you're really investing in, and
And
not
you
take
truly
anybody's.
can trust that this company. I mean, and so both in terms of their integrity and also they know what they're doing. They really do, and they've shown it for so long.
I would like to mention that we're trying to get the word out through social media as well. And so any clients who are on Facebook and could go in to Secure Retirement is our page, and give it a follow or like, and you will see that we're spreading the word about IMPAX and sustainable investing and working to get the word out there.
Because we know there's a lot of people in Northern California and across the country and world who really are quite interested in this topic. I mean, it's growing and growing.
Definitely. Yep.
All right, guys.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. I mean, it really means a lot that you show your interest in this, and our number and email, and just let us know if we can provide any additional information, education, portfolio ideas, whatever you need. Okay, with that,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Emily.
much.
Thank you,
Take
Amber.
care.
Thank you, Amber.
Take care. Bye-bye.